Hello and welcome to Food Safety Fridays. My name is Simon Timperley from the International Food Safety and Quality Network. Today, our topic is stored product pests, and our presenter is Shell Hartzer from 360 Pest and Food Safety Consulting. It's great to have you along again with us, Shell. We've got lots of people, 1,052 registered.
Woo.
That's amazing, eh? All to see you and your pests.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. Where are you joining from today, Shell?
So I am just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, here in the U.S.
Very nice. And the weather is it as nice as this?
No. You definitely have better weather there. It's actually not too bad. It's probably about going to be 35 Celsius today. So sunny, not too bad.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, I'm in Barbados, as you can tell there, and it's lovely. Tell us where you're joining from in the sidebar, and great to see you all. I'm going to play the sponsors ads now, and we'll be back for the presentation afterwards. Okay. Okay. It's a bit different today, ladies and gents. I don't know why my video is freezing all the time, but oh, that's weird. We've not got a PowerPoint, but Shell's got something even better. Can you share it with us, Shell?
Yeah, let's do this. So we thought we'd do something a little bit different because that's just what I do. And figured we'd give you something a little bit different to start your day, to end your day, wherever you're joining in from. So thank you all for being here. It is super exciting, especially when I see all the places that you folks are tuning in from. As you have questions, please drop those in the chat box. We will get to them at the end, I promise. And if we don't, I will follow up with you later. But we're here to talk about stored product pests. And this is something that obviously, if we're in the food industry, we're going to deal with in some manner, some fashion. And I'm actually not going to spend a whole lot of time on identification. There are lots of great resources out there that you can use, lots of books, lots of university sites. So if you have questions on identification, plenty of good stuff out there for you. I do want to kind of zero in on a couple things for some of these so that you can look for certain things. And to start off with, when we talk about stored product pests, especially our beetles, these all look like small reddish brown beetles. And if you're not looking at them nice and close up like this, you could easily mistake one for another. And that can be a challenge if the identification is not correct, because then we're wasting time looking someplace where maybe we don't need to be looking for these. So that identification step is definitely important when we talk about this. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. So, and this is, I should say, this is a great picture. This was taken by a graduate student at one of the Canadian universities. And just to see these all lined up next to each other, you know, from biggest to smallest, again, are you going to really see that size difference in the field? It's a really powerful picture when you think of it that way. So what I want to start with is what we typically call our warehouse beetles. And you can see when we call them warehouse beetles, we're dealing with 30, 40 some odd species here. So each one is slightly different. Each one is going to be coming from a slightly different location. But the underlying factor here of these is that they're all after protein, high protein sources. So we're looking at milk powder, protein powder, nuts, animal skins, any type of animal products. This particular one is called a carpet beetle. This is one of the common ones that we have in the US. And a lot of these, like this one, are found commonly outside. So now we have to worry about not what's just coming in on your raw products or what might be infesting your facility, but some of these coming from the outside and making their way in as doors are open, windows are open, whatever. And plus, I just think this is an absolutely beautiful beetle. I mean, just those colors, the scales on its wing, it's a beautiful beetle. Now, this one is a Trogoderma species. We have a few of these. If you are outside the US, one of the big ones that you are concerned with is the Capra beetle. It is very destructive. And the neat thing, well, I think it's kind of neat, it's probably not a good thing in the long run, is that a lot of these beetles are able to diapause. They're basically able to stop their development. They'll just kind of go into a type of hibernation when conditions aren't right. So say you go out there, you find infestations, you clean up all that food source that they've been using. But of course, you're never going to get all of them. So these can survive 6 to 9 months without eating, just kind of sitting there, usually in the larval form. We don't see that with the adults, just sitting there waiting until those conditions get right again, that there's food again, that the temperatures are right, and those populations will just go right back up. In the US, we have a similar species that is referred to as the typical warehouse beetle. Again, kind of same color pattern on it, but again, a lot of protein with these folks. So this is what we're looking at. And again, from the US, for common names, these can be called cabinet beetles because they're found in people's cabinets eating the flour or nuts or whatever high protein source they can get their hands on. We have hide beetles eating animal hides, feathers, anything like that, any type of animal byproduct. So when we're looking for these, when we start to see one of these pop up, we are looking for that high protein food source. Okay, so you can ignore some of the other stuff that's out there and focus in on those high protein sources. Now, cigarette and drugstore beetles, these things are so hardy. You will find these in some of the weirdest spots. And you can see here, I'm going to make sure that I do have this muted. There we go. You can see here, this is a great video from Insects Limited, one of our companies in the United States. These are small, kind of roundish beetles. So a little bit more kind of button shaped versus that rectangular shaped of some of the other ones. And, they're just going to devour anything that they can get into. The reason these are called cigarette beetles is because they were originally found feeding on tobacco. Now, tobacco is not really a healthy product. It's got nicotine in it. We use nicotine derivatives as insecticides. So we will also find these feeding on rodenticides. It's insane the amount of things that they can be found feeding on that often aren't really considered food sources. Think of your typical block of rodenticide. That's not something we're going to eat, but they get in there and they get to the grain bits that are inside those blocks.
Cheryl,
Sorry?
the presentation isn't displaying
Oh no. Okay, let's try this. Oh no.
Is it not working?
It's not working. Okay, let's try this. We'll just go back. We're going to cancel our screen share here. And then we're going to try this again. Sorry about that, folks.
It's okay.
All right, how about now? You got my bag of flour?
Nope. It worked before.
Oh no.
So the window is
okay.
active. Yeah, it's got to be the active window that you're on.
Oh, I'm sorry about this, folks. It's just so exciting that the computer can't keep up with me, I think. It's just stored product pests are so amazing.
I know.
But when we think of those cigarette and drugstore beetles,
it's still not there, by the way, Shell.
I know. Hold on.
Okay.
I'm getting there. I tried to restart it, so
I'll leave you to it then.
Okay, how about now?
Nope. Best laid plans.
Oh gosh.
Why is it not working now?
I don't know. We had it working earlier. That is so weird. Okay, folks, hold on just a minute. I promise we will get this.
So it's a window on your desktop, and you're
Yes.
Yeah. And you've selected that active window. So
yes. We got to have problems, don't we? Can't just make this easy.
Yeah. I don't know if it's when you do the screen share, there's on mine Chrome tab window, entire screen. I don't know if you've tried the different. I think it's on the.
Okay, let's try this. Let's try this. How about now?
Nope.
Oh, I'm so sorry about this, folks. Oh, wait, here. Okay, window. There. No?
No, nothing. Is there any other way around it? I can't share it, can I?
Yep, hold on. I've got something else going here. All right, folks, give me just 1 minute here, and I am gonna bring this up. See how that works. All right, so we're gonna do this a little differently.
Improvisation.
We're gonna do it just a little differently today. We're gonna have some fun. All right, you got my screen?
I can see you. No, that's it. There's nothing.
Oh my goodness.
Don't know why.
Okay. I do have a PowerPoint here. Do you think we can load up a PowerPoint real quick?
Yeah. If you email it to me, then I'll be able to do that.
Okay. This one's going to be just a little bit different, folks. I apologize. We tried something new, and well,
it did work.
It doesn't always work out. So we tried.
Yeah, we tested it. It worked, but
it worked. We did.
The confused flower beetle has caused us some confusion.
Okay, I'm going to email you this again, folks. I deeply apologize. We tried to do something a little different, and we'll make it work for the next time. But when we talk about these stored product pests, it is really interesting to think about what they are eating and what they are feeding on, because that's where you're going to find them. That's where you're going to find the sanitation issues. That's where you're going to find these things, and you can therefore pinpoint them. We have a lot of very large food facilities, food processing, food storage, all of those things. So if we can pinpoint where they're most likely to be, we save time, we find them faster, and then we can address them faster. So with those cigarette beetles and now my computer wants to go really slow. With those cigarette beetles and drugstore beetles, you're going to find them on weird things. You find them on spices. I mean, of all things, how can something develop on something like cayenne powder? But I found them in totes of cayenne powder, and it's just incredible to see how they're able to develop on that when it's something that, again, you probably don't think of that much as necessarily a food source. So we've got those protein feeders, we've got those weird feeders, if you want to put it that way, of being on tobacco, being on drugstore products. And then we have the stuff that will eat pretty much anything. We have the stuff that's going to be like Indian meal moth, flower beetles, things like that it's going to be harder to nail down those sources, where they are, what they're doing. So if we can target those areas where they might be, if we have Indian meal moth, they can be on almost anything, but it's usually a dry good. It's usually not a wet good. So when we talk about the stored product pests in general, these are the things that are really going after our food. They're the ones that will get in, that they will infest. Of course, we have things like cockroaches, rodents, flies, but those are almost accidental. There's a food source, and so they get in and take advantage of it. These stored product pests are really looking for a way in. They will chew through packaging. They will get into things. The sawtooth green beetles are able to lay their eggs. They're able to find pinpoint holes in packaging, and they will lay their eggs around that little hole so that when the eggs hatch, those tiny little larvae squeeze through the hole and they can get into packages. So this is why we see stored product pests at the beginning of production, coming in maybe on raw ingredients. During production, we're going to see them inside equipment. Red flower beetles, especially the tribolium species, are getting into equipment. They're finding that food that's in process. And then we can get to the end of the line where maybe they get in just before packaging, or maybe they penetrate that packaging. So all of that means that these are not easy to deal with. So what do? One, we want to find them. And of course, with any type of pest management, what we're looking for as a major control issue is sanitation. We want to clean up the food source. Everything needs food, water, and shelter, right? In order for you to survive, we need food, water, and shelter. I've got my water here. I've got a roof over my head. I had my breakfast this morning. So I am going to survive today. This is exactly what these stored product pests need. So again, we may have some food differences that we can zero in. The challenge here is, how do we clean up all those food sources? Because you're working with food. It's not like you can just take all the food out of your warehouse, out of your production line. You have to have food there. So how do we clean that up? How do we eliminate that food source? And that's the challenge, because we can't. I mean, in all honesty, we cannot eliminate the food source. There's always going to be something. So try to shift your thinking here from that elimination. Again, we can't possibly get every little crumb of flour, every little piece of pistachio that's out there. Let's think about trying to minimize the amount and minimize the access. So again, I've got my water here. Sorry, Simon, you good?
Yeah, sorry. Do you want me to load the slides?
Sure, go for it.
Put them on. Okay, here we go. There you go.
All right. There we go. So when we talk about that sanitation step, we are looking for, what we can do. Okay. This is challenging because it's going to be everywhere. It can even be outside. Remember, I told you that some of those warehouse beetles, some of those tribolium species, Trogodermas, are going to come from the outside. So we even have to worry about that. So what we're looking to do is minimize the amount and the access. We're trying to clean up as much as we possibly can and make it harder for them to get to. So in this case, we have a dirty drain here. Can we clean out most of that? because if they don't have enough to eat, maybe they still have a little bit, but they're not going to be all that healthy. They're going to be looking for more food instead of looking for a mate. So, I may have my oatmeal here, and if I only have a little bit of oatmeal, I'm still going to be hungry. I'm not going to be moving as fast. I'm not going to be reproducing as fast. So that's going to keep the populations down, and it's going to keep them more manageable. It's not going to eliminate the problem, which, I mean, that's what we want. But realistically, if we can just make it harder for them, that's going to keep those populations low. It's going to keep them stressed out, and it's going to make them easier to handle. Now, the other thing we can think of is making it harder for them to get to. So if they can't get to this drain, say if we put a cap over this drain, if they can't get there, or they have to work really hard to try and squeeze themselves under that cap, they're spending much more energy to try and get to that food. So again, they've spent that energy, they need more food, they need more energy, and it's just not working for them. So that's what we're looking for. And again, this could be inside or outside. We've got some great pictures here. The one of the pallets up here is actually taken from a bottling facility. This one with the dumpsters is taken from which one was this? I think this was a factory in a very dense urban area. So they had lots of neighbors. They had to be concerned about what their neighbors were doing too. And that's hard because we can't clean all of that up. We have another one. Again, if we have those trees, if we have those plants right up against the building, it makes it easier for them to get in and get to all of that good food. So when we talk about minimizing the access, if they don't have this pathway to get in and to get that food, they're going to have to go somewhere else. Or, they're going to slowly die because they just can't get enough food in there. So sanitation is that method of trying to eliminate that food source to the best of your ability. It's never going to be perfect. Just like when we talk about exclusion, you're never going to be able to seal up every single door perfectly. I mean, you'd have to keep all of your employees there 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, and you couldn't bring in stuff or let stuff out because everything has to be closed. It's never going to be perfect. So again, how much can we do? Where are those pests coming from? Is it something like many of these stored product pests where we are bringing them in maybe with raw ingredients? In that case, yes, we want to seal up this door, but the major source is we are literally bringing it in. So we have to think of how we can exclude those new products from everything else until we have a chance to inspect them, make sure that they're clear of those pests. So that exclusion step isn't just, hey, let's seal the building and keep the outside out and the inside in. That's very important too. But it's also thinking about inside the facility. If you know you're bringing in raw products that could be infested, how do we exclude those? How do we keep those away from everything else until we have a chance to look at them? And that again minimizes the spread and stops them from getting to other sections. You can even think of it in different areas of a warehouse. If you can put up walls between different sections of a warehouse and maybe store certain products that are high risk on one side, products that are low risk on another side, so that they can keep doing their thing but not spreading out. You've got them more contained, and the more contained you can keep that problem, well, the more contained and easy it is to deal with. If you're dealing with it spread out through your entire facility, that's a challenge. But if you're dealing with it in just one room, that's a little bit easier. So if you're inside your facility, again, look for those cracks and crevices. We know that insects are very small. I showed you that first picture of how small those flower beetles are and weevils and things like that. So if you can see daylight around a door or a window, that means that seal isn't sealing all the way to the ground or the sides, and those insects can get in. Okay, so look for those things. Obviously, if we're dealing with rats and mice, that's going to be a little bit more, but let's focus on the stored product pests for right now. So, and this is an interesting one. I mentioned that a lot of these pests have come from the outside. Cigarette beetles build up throughout the summer here in the United States, and towards the fall, those outside populations are just very large. And in this instance, what happened was we were getting these cigarette beetles in the middle of this warehouse. There were no doors nearby. There were no windows that were letting them in, but it was kind of right in the middle. And we were finding them just on a few racks of product, and racking our brains to say, okay, what is going on here? How are they getting here? We know what foods they're liking, and yeah, there's some of that here, but there's plenty of that otherwhere too. What is going on? So what we found out was we had fans up above from the air handling system and air ducts. The last time they had installed the filters and changed the filters on those HVAC systems, they didn't install them correctly. So the cigarette beetles were literally being sucked in from the outside and deposited in the middle of this warehouse and finding food that they could feed on. So interesting situations when you think of it, and how many places that they can get in. And here you go. Here's a picture of that air handling system. Those filters created that gap. So they were able to get in, and again, just high populations on the outside. Now, again, I apologize, this isn't quite the right picture, but when we think of these, monitoring for these and looking for these, yes, your eyes are good, but your eyes are not that good to see those tiny little beetles all the time, because they like those cracks and crevices. So we do have some things that we can use to help us to basically be that extra set of eyes for us to use. Those insect light traps, they're often called electronic fly killers in some areas. There's many of our stored product pests that are attracted to light. Again, the cigarette beetles, Indian meal moth. This is not perfect because you're relying on their eyesight, and you're relying on them being fairly close to this light source. But this can tell you that story of, if we're finding those Indian meal moth in this light trap, there is obviously something going around very close to here. Where is that sanitation issue? Where is that exclusion issue? How do we fix it? And then hopefully we see those numbers go back down at the next check of this. You'll often see these rodent traps inside, these kind of metal boxes. And yes, they're for rodents, but we often put glue boards in them to, one, contain the rodent, and as an insect monitor as well. So when we have those flower beetles or warehouse beetles that are crawling around on the ground, they can get into here, they can get stuck on those glue boards. And again, that gives us a sense of positioning of where the problem could be, of how bad the problem can be. Now, with these glue boards, there's nothing specifically attractive about them. So we often call them like blunder traps, because you kind of just blunder into them as you're walking by for the beetles. But they can still tell a story, and they can still tell what's going on. And if you have that high population of say, weevils that are nearby, well, one, we know that weevils are going to be in a full grain, in that whole grain, that kernel of corn, that kernel of wheat. We're looking for that whole grain. And if we start to see them show up in this particular trap, where is the closest amount of whole grain that we have? We can very quickly hone in on those areas. So when we're talking about these things, they tell a story, but you have to do something then. And that's the key. When we start to see these things come up, we have to let them tell us a story. Now, these devices aren't perfect, and things can happen to them. So we want to make sure that they are always operational. We want to make sure that they are doing the job that they should. And I apologize because I don't think I have a picture of the pheromone traps, but there are numerous pheromone traps that you can use, and that has that pull. Okay, that one, it has the pheromone in it that is their way of talking to each other. So in the case of some of our moths, it's a very strong sex pheromone. So the males think that there's a female there, and they all go to that trap. Now, we're not going to catch any females because they're the ones who are putting off that pheromone, but we still have an idea then how many males are there. What numbers are they in? Are similar traps in other areas showing the same thing, or can we narrow down those areas? We also have those floor traps. Sometimes they're a sticky trap. Sometimes they're more of a dome trap, and they have a little bit of oil in the center of it to kind of keep those insects contained in there. That's going to be for your crawling insects. And most of those, it's an aggregation pheromone. So it's basically saying, hey, we found a good spot. Why don't you come over here and stay with us? It's not as strong as that sex pheromone, but it still pulls them into a degree. It's not going to pull them from, 100 meters away, but whatever's close, whatever's within that range of that pheromone wafting out, that infested product, those insects are going to be somewhere close to that. So letting it tell you the story. And Stephen, to answer your question, I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat here. Glue boards are, if they are not banned in the UK, they are very close to being banned in the UK. We are seeing that in some situations. So I'm not sure about the pheromone glue boards, since those are different. But yes, your flat glue boards that they use a lot for rodent control are being banned. And I'm speaking from the US, but I know that we have some different regulations in different countries that are going on. So if you have questions about that, again, drop them in the chat, and I will try and answer those. So once we have dealt with those sanitation issues, once we have dealt with the exclusion, we can get to the part where maybe we have to do some treatments. And we can do everything from that small treatment of just using a little bit of bait, or we may have to treat the whole facility. And this is, again, where it comes in important. If you can keep that pest issue contained to a small area, you don't have to shut down the entire facility. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars, millions of dollars to treat the entire place. You can focus on that one room. So what we're doing with a lot of stored product pest control is we're trying to prevent it. We want to prevent it from getting in the first place, but let's be honest, there's always the chance it's going to get in. I don't know of a single food facility anywhere that has never had a problem with pests. There's always something. So our reaction time, using those monitors and reacting quickly when they tell us that story of something going on, can keep them in that small area, which makes it easier and much less expensive to treat. Now, I do have a note on here about having an approved product list, especially in the US, in Europe, in many other countries. There are only I won't say a few. There are certain products that you can use inside a food production facility or a food storage facility, and there are many things that you can't. So it's very helpful. It's a requirement in the US to have that list that says, these are the products that we can use. And even to a degree, these are the situations we can use it in, because you may have a product that you can't use inside a food facility, but it's very good to use it outside to keep some of those pest numbers low, so fewer of them are going to get in. And of course, the big thing here is we don't want to contaminate any type of food or food contact surface. We want to keep the food safe for all the consumers that are out there eating them. And at the same time, we don't want the insects that are in there. So we are looking at that prevention. How can we keep them out? That's going to be exclusion. But we also have to think of some of the sanitation issues that might be on the outside. And we have to think of what's going to be there. You may be in an area that has capra beetles. In the US, I'm not concerned about capra beetles. I'm going to be concerned about those cigarette beetles in this location, or I'm going to be very concerned about weevils in this condition. So knowing which of these stored product pests is a risk to your facility is really important, because again, you want to focus on what could be there, not everything that's out there. We have roof rats here in the United States, but they're kind of just in the south and in some of the port cities. So if I'm working in the north of our country, I don't have to worry about roof rats. I can focus on the other rodent species that are there. Same thing with these stored product pests. Which ones are going to be the risk there? Then we may have a seasonal issue. And Haresh, just asked about extra precautions during the summer. We definitely see shifts in weather, and that could be heat and cold. That can also be water. We've just had a hurricane in the south of Georgia here where I am in the US, and there's a lot of flooding. It could also be a drought. It's going to move stuff around. So my recommendation on that is, again, you have your monitoring devices so you can kind of see when those populations start to shift. And if you've been doing this for a while, you know when that seasonal change typically happens. It's not always perfect. It's not always going to start on July 20th of every single year, but you know about when that's going to start. So then you can start increasing your preventative methods. You're really going to check for those door seals to keep stuff on the outside. Maybe you're going to do a little bit of pesticide treatment on the outside to keep things a little bit down and a little bit further away. You're looking for those things to do just before you know that that's going to hit. Now, that's a lot harder if we have a sudden flood or if we have an ongoing drought. That's going to change things as well. But trying to think ahead just a little bit and think of what these pests are doing. In the case of summer, their populations are high. They've had months to develop and reproduce. And so we know that there's just going to be lots of them out there. When we see weather-related issues, again, I'll go to the floods that we're having in some cases. Many of those outside pests, or the outside stored product pests, are getting moved out of their homes, their usual areas, and they're looking for dry ground. Where is the dry ground? It's your food facility. Your food facility has been protected. So now they're going to try and get there because that's where food is, that's where dry ground is, that's where the less risk is. Again, a little bit harder when we're looking at prevention for those issues, but still, we had plenty of time to know that the hurricane was coming. So a day before, 2 days before, you can still do something that's going to help. Now, talking about stored product pests and prevention, when we're looking at, bringing goods in, this is a hard one because in many cases, you're bringing in lots and lots of raw ingredients. Depending on how big your processing facility is, you could be dealing with tons, literally tons of raw ingredients, and it's impossible to inspect every single one of those. But it's still necessary. It's still, again, this is terrible. Just clean up all the food, all your problems go away. Just inspect everything and everything's good. But we can't legitimately do that. So trying to inspect as much as possible, trying to look for those signs of pests, and making sure that you are definitely using first in, first out procedures. If you have goods that are coming in, we don't want to get them stuck in the back of the warehouse, because the longer something sits there, the longer that it has a chance of becoming infested with stored product pests. Okay, so using those products quickly, trying not to over order. But in some cases, we will have products that sit there for long periods of time, because maybe we have gotten that entire tote of cayenne powder, but it's going to take 6 months to use it up. But knowing that that's high risk for those cigarette beetles and drugstore beetles, maybe we put some extra monitors around them so that if it does start to creep up, we know right away and we can do something about it. And that's the key here, is that corrective action that we're looking for. I apologize for flipping through these so fast. We're looking for that corrective action, because if you find, I'll go back to weevils. If we find a corn weevil in the facility, okay, you take it out of the trap and you move on. But we haven't addressed the problem. We haven't addressed that raw ingredient that has those weevils in it, that is infested and that may be spreading. So as you're looking at your program and as you're looking at your pest control, establishing thresholds. I mean, if we find one weevil, is that really a big deal? Maybe it just got in from outside. But what if we find 2 weevils or 5 weevils or 10 weevils? We have to have that corrective action that says, okay, now that we found this, we have to go do something. That's when that inspection kicks in. That's when the extra sanitation kicks in, to keep those populations low, to keep them contained, to keep them easier to deal with. And I like throwing this slide up because when we talk about IPM, it sounds so simple. You know, you identify your pest, you inspect for your pests, you do the sanitation, you do the exclusion, you put out physical controls, and you do the pesticide application. Boom, 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 boom. Step A, step B, step C. Okay. But it doesn't work like that. In a lot of cases, again, with food facilities, that sanitation step is never going to be perfect. And that's going to affect everything else. But that's okay. Okay. Just because you can't do perfect sanitation doesn't mean it's hopeless and you just can't do anything. We have to then respond and say, okay, since we know we have a sanitation issue, maybe in this part of our facility, maybe we put some more traps out. Maybe we do some extra inspections so that when this does happen and this does creep up, we can do something about it. We make sure that we have that identification correct. All of these things interact and intercept. I mentioned at the beginning that I wasn't going to go through too much identification step because there's so many good resources out there. But if we don't identify the pest correctly, we could be looking in the wrong spot. We could be looking at the wrong products. And then that goes to our inspection. That's going to take a lot more time, which is effort. We will not find that sanitation issue as quickly. But again, just because something happened like that doesn't mean it's a hopeless situation. Okay, but remember that this is complicated. In a lot of presentations, even the one that I've just done, we've kind of taken it step by step and says, do this, but realize that it will get complicated. It's not pretty, it's not step by step and all of your problems are finished. We have to kind of look at all of these things and find out what is lacking. Maybe it is that door that is never going to be closed. That door has to stay open for some reason. Okay, what can we do to minimize what's getting in and capture more of what does? Maybe we need some extra traps there. Maybe we can do something in that spot. But knowing which one of these things isn't quite going to be 100% can help you move things and do things around those areas. So consider that. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to this real quick here. Consider that as you're designing these programs. Now, I want you to do two things when you are done with this presentation. Okay. And I apologize because I had these on slides. I want you to do two things. I mentioned those monitoring devices, and we have hanging pheromone traps. We may have those floor traps. We may just have glue boards, whatever that is. I want you to go and look at your program and see where all of those devices are. Now, if those devices have not changed in more than 2 years, are they still doing a good job? Are they still doing what you need them to do? Okay. Things change. I mean, we talked about the weather. We talked about, summer versus winter. We talked about things changing. Maybe you've brought in new products. Maybe you've designed new product lines, new manufacturing. Things change. So if your monitoring devices are still in the same place that they were a few years ago, there probably needs to be some shifting and some adjusting. And I find this a lot. It happens a lot. We put out those devices and they stay there forever. They never get moved. They're always in the same place. And that's not good because conditions have changed. So your monitoring devices need to be changed. So that is the first thing I want you to do when we are done with this presentation. I want you to go look at your device map, find out where your devices are, and see how long they've been there and if things need to be shifted and changed. Those devices do not have to stay in the same place forever. There's a reason why they're small, they're movable, and hopefully not anchored down to the ground in some way. Change them, move them, make sure that they can still tell you that story that you want them to tell you. Now, the second thing I want you to do is I want you to go and check that approved pesticide list. Okay, check to make sure that has changed, that has updated. Maybe there's new products out there that you can be using that are more effective than some of the products that you're using. Maybe there's old products that you cannot use anymore. We just discussed, even though it's not a pesticide, we discussed, glue boards. They're, especially in Europe, glue boards are not allowed to be used except in very certain circumstances. So we want to make sure that those lists are up to date, because if they are, that gives you the tools that you are going to need to combat these stored product pests. If you do not have that, if your tools are wrong, if your tools are old, that's going to take you more time. And more time means more money and more unhappy customers. We know, especially with social media today, all it takes is one little flower beetle in your breakfast sandwich, in your breakfast cereal in the morning, and that's going to go on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and everything else. And that's your company now that is associated with that pest problem, and that could result in recalls. That could result in just bad press that people no longer want to buy your breakfast cereal anymore. So that preventative aspect of trying to outthink the stored product pests is key, but it's never perfect. So when we can't prevent it, the key is to react quickly and to let those devices tell that story, read the story, and react quickly to those locations where they're in. And that is going to save a lot of time, a lot of money, and potentially down the road, any type of recall or anything like that. So your 2 assignments, again, when you finish today or tomorrow, when you go into your site, you are going to look at those devices and see where they're positioned and make sure that that's still good. If you have an outside pest control company doing that work, talk to them. Say, why haven't these devices moved? Do we need to shift them? You should have that partnership with your pest control company. Again, if you've hired a third party, you should have that partnership. You have things to do, they have things to do, but talk about it, communicate about it to make sure that that plan is doing the best it can. And then your second step there is going to be looking at that approved product list, making sure it is up to date, making sure that you have the right products on there for the right stored product pests that are going to be a risk to your facility. All right. Once again, I apologize. We had this all worked out. It was supposed to work. But thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for listening to this with just the slight problems that we've had. If you have any questions, we're going to go through the chat box here. But if you want, there's all of my information. Reach out to me, email me, go to my website. If you go to my website, we actually have a weekly newsletter that we send out. So you get lots of tips on different pests, different situations, different things in the news that you may need to be aware of. So feel free to go to my website and sign up for that. Just put your email in and you will get that weekly. Yep, email's up there. Website's up there. All right, let's hit the questions here.
It's typical, isn't it? But anyway, thanks, Cheryl. You got, did it.
We made it work.
Content was delivered. Yeah, made it work.
Just like pest control, things go wrong. We have to respond to those conditions and make it work for us.
Exactly. And yeah, the thing is, that's the only annoying thing is it was a great presentation with videos in and all sorts of things. So it's a bit of a shame, but we'll do it again. Anyway,
well, and can we still send the link out to folks so that they can go in and view it?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah,
so folks, you will still get the link to the presentation so you can see it and see what we were going to talk about. But I'm pretty sure we covered everything. But yeah, you missed some great videos.
That's it. But anyway, the good part still to come. Questions. Darren, how long is the life cycle of a cigarette beetle and flower beetle?
Oh, great question. So flower beetles, most of our stored product beetles will develop in about 30 days. So 30 days from that egg to hatch out and go to the adult stage. Flower beetles as adults can live over a year. Cigarette beetles will only live for about 2 months as an adult.
Okay, thank you. A question from Sidesh. How to control SPI brought in from shipments through material from containers and reefers in high traffic loading bays of food facilities?
Yeah. If there's any way you can strain it out, like, if you're bringing a flour, if you can sift that flour out as it's coming in, anything that you can do to physically remove that stuff as it comes in. The other option that we have, there's many different food sources that are required to be fumigated before being used and being brought into the country or brought out of the country. So if you know that you have a product that is typically infested, you may want to look at having it fumigated before it arrives in your facility if you can't sift it and physically remove the pests that could be in it.
Okay, thanks. Question from Anna. Do the pheromone traps attract only IMM males? What is the average distribution between males and females in case of infestations?
Good question. So most of the pheromone traps, they're multi-species. So it's the IMM, it's almond moth, it's raisin moth, it's a few of the other ones. But yes, it is all the males because it's that female sex pheromone that goes out. It's that female perfume. So it's attracting in the males. Good news is that population is usually about 50-50. So while you're capturing some of those males, there's still some that aren't going to be out there. And you didn't ask about the range, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Those pheromone traps, again, are just a tool. It's never going to catch everything. It's never going to catch every single male that's out there. But they do have a range of somewhere around, it kind of depends. I said I'd answer this question. Now I'm not going to answer it. Give or take about 5 meters from that trap, depending on what's around it and things like that. So that's going to be your range.
Okay, got it. Question from Pradeep. What is the best way to control flies other than electric light traps?
Absolutely. Well, one, if you can, keep them out. So we're going to divide large flies, which are typically coming from the outside, and small flies, which are typically coming from the inside. So those flies on the outside, if you can clean up their food source, maybe it's a dumpster, maybe it's a garbage pit, maybe it's a dead animal that's somewhere on your property. We have a lot of flies that like that carrion. Keeping them out and removing that food source if you can. Same thing for those inside flies, the fruit flies, the phorid flies, the moth flies. Find those wet areas that have that buildup of organic material that they're feeding in. Remove that material, flush it down the drains, get rid of it, get rid of all that gunk, and you've gotten rid of the small flies.
Got you. Shaz, if the premise such as ice production is on open space, how to control the pests?
Okay. So if I understand this question right, we've got a cold area, and many of our insects, especially those the warehouse beetles, the dermestid beetles, are pretty cold hardy. So again, putting your monitors where your high risk products are. So say, you have that cold area, but you have a lot of canned food. These aren't going to get into the canned food, but those bags of food next to it, that's going to be a higher risk that they can get in. So if I understand that question right, still go with your monitors, still go with that inspection, and figure out where the highest risk is. And again, it's only going to be a few stored product species that can handle that. So you're only dealing with a couple species instead of most of them.
Okay. Question from Herlinda. For pest identification, what book or source would you recommend?
Oh, there's lots of great sources out there. In the U.S., we have the NPMA handbook, which is good. There's a PDF from Canada that has a wealth of information. If you email me, I'll find that information for you. And then there's lots of good university sites. So wherever you're located, say you're in Australia is going to have, a great website from either the government or the university that shows which ones you have in your area. So you can look for that as well.
Okay, we'll include Cheryl's contact details in the follow-up email. Question from Bryce. I think you did mention this. Why are glue boards not allowed in the EU? Just to remind.
Yeah, so the reason why is because they were used for rodents, and if you've ever seen a rodent get stuck to a glue board, it's not exactly pretty, and that can be disturbing to people. The rodent doesn't die right away versus something like a snap trap, which is immediately gonna disconnect that spinal column and kill it. So it was considered, something that wasn't great from an animal welfare standpoint.
Yeah. Okay. Best way to control ants in food processing from
ants. That's cheating. Those aren't a stored product pest. Yeah. Find out where they are. If the colony is mostly on the outside, try and treat that colony. If they're on the inside, maybe you can't find that. The best tool you are going to have is baits, and make sure you put enough bait down. Remember that there's only about 10% of that colony that's out and foraging. So you need to get them 90% that's in the colony and get those ants to take all that bait back. So bait, and bait a lot.
Okie dokie. Question from Debbie. We have to anchor down the rodent traps inside processing facility. GFSI requires it. Do you disagree? Do you agree?
I do, because BRC and SQF specifically do not require them to be anchored down in any way. If you're following a different audit standard that's one of the GFSI standards, go ahead and contact me. I will look through that. But there's a lot of misconception when it comes to some of the audit standards and what you can do. And unfortunately, a lot of pest control people are not always as up to date on that as you can. So email me about that, and I will help you with that specifically.
Okay, thank you. Question from Anna. Are pheromone devices species specific? Are these multi-species pheromone devices effective?
Yep. So most of what we're going to use are multi-species. I mentioned the Indian meal moth one is also for almond moth, raisin moth, a few others. The floor traps are usually for most of the crawling beetles. So yes, they are effective, but remember, they're not a control device. They're a monitor. They're going to capture some stuff, but it's not controlling the population. So you have to use it as that monitoring device and let it tell you that story. But yes, they are absolutely effective.
Okay, I like this one. Interested to know this. Haresh, are insects becoming smarter every day?
Oh, that's an interesting question. And I will say no. However, climate change is allowing them to spread and become more. So in the United States, we've seen pests that we once thought of as southern pests are now getting all the way up into Canada. So while they're not necessarily that intelligence, they have been able to spread and do more with climate change helping them along.
Okay, yeah. Carlito, question. Could you send to us pictures of traps, or if possible, the design and specification of the pest traps?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Controlling birds, it's not really, do you want to take it or not?
All right. We'll cover it quick. Again, not a stored product pest, but
outside of the bakery.
Yeah, birds are tricky because there's not a lot you can do about them because most bird species are protected. But what we're looking at there is discouraging them from being there. So we're going to use scare devices. We're going to, use spikes or wires or something like that to ensure that they can't land there and they have to go somewhere else.
I think you've sort of covered this, Liz. How to control flies when loading a container outside.
Yeah, with flies outside and loading, anything that you can do, any type of netting, anything you can do to kind of enclose that space. And of course, insect light traps will also help to draw them away from that a bit.
Okay. Mike, thinking of using Sidetrack for IMM, are they as effective as they are made out to be?
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, they are phenomenal. Now, the thing to remember about Sidetrack and the mating disruption systems is they are only going to work on the adults. Okay. So those adults come out as soon as that Sidetrack hits, they're too confused. They can't mate. They die in a couple days, but you still have those larvae and eggs that may be in there. But as soon as those reach maturity, again, that's going to knock them down. So you're going to see that immediate knockdown in numbers. And then for about a month, you may see some scattered ones. But if you keep that Sidetrack going long term, it will keep that population almost to nothing. It's really pretty amazing technology.
Well, you've opened the floodgates now, because if you're going to deal with birds, then you've got to deal with not bees, but wasps. What can you do with wasps?
Yeah, and that can be a problem, especially around bakeries or anybody doing anything with a lot of sugar, especially, if you're disposing of sugar on the outside. Again, try and contain that. If you've just got open dumpsters on the outside, of course they're going to swarm in there. If you can kind of contain that better and make it harder for them to get in there, harder to get to the food, they're going to go somewhere else. And for wasps, again, keep an eye on it because they'll start to build their colony, and taking it down early is your best bet, not letting them get to huge colonies.
Question from Paul. We have lots of problems with moths in peanut. The big eggs are fumigated on the country of origin, but still happens. We've tried modified atmosphere, big bags. It was even worse. Can you give me a clue about that?
Yeah, so we just mentioned the sidetrack and the mating disruption product. I'm guessing that your moths are probably Indian meal moth. So, and that's something we see in coffee as well. Coffee tends to just get infested and it sits there and it keeps going. So I would look into the mating disruption for your moths and peanuts.
Okay. Question from Pratik. Can cigarette beetles' eggs survive through hot baking oven temperatures? Can they breed in the finished product after baking?
It depends on the temperature. Cigarette beetle aren't too heat resistant. So if you get it up over 40 degrees, those eggs are not going to survive.
Okay.
40 degrees Celsius, sorry.
Yeah. All right, Stephen. Can pheromone devices induce an infestation of otherwise uninterested insects?
Oh, that is a great question. Thank you for asking that, because we get that a lot. The short answer is no. Again, that range on these pheromone traps isn't miles long. So you wouldn't want to put one right by a door, especially a door that stays open, because then, yeah, maybe it can pull in some of the ones from the outside. But if you're placing them correctly around your facility, they will not pull anything in from the outside.
Okay. Chris, what should be the approach taken to establish threshold levels for monitoring devices such as ILTs and pheromone traps?
Oh, you guys have such great questions today. This is awesome. I would ask you, Chris, how many are you willing to deal with? In most cases, people will say 0, but the key here is, what are you going to do about it? So when one of those hits a trap, what's your response? And so I would have multiple thresholds. If we see one, we're going to go out, inspect that area, and clean a little deeper. If we see 5, we're going to put more pheromone traps on. So I would have multiple thresholds. And again, it kind of depends on what kind of products you have and what your tolerance is. So that is completely up to you.
Okay, Michelle, is there mating disruption for AGMs? Is anyone else experiencing a huge AGM issue this year?
Ooh, Michelle, I'd be interested to know where you are. I don't believe so. The mating disruption, again, is good for most of the other moths. I can look into that for you and see if there isn't some efficacy to it. But interesting, because I've not so far heard of any extra Angmoy moth issues this year, but curious to know where you are and what you're seeing and what product you have.
This is one that I'd like to know. How do you control fruit flies found in pineapples and other fruits when reefer containers are opened at destinations? Before you answer, why do fruit flies taunt me? Not only do they land around my fruit, and they come to my face. And anyway, I found a solution, a container with some cling film on, with vinegar in, with some pinholes, and they go in there, and
Yeah, there are plenty of homemade traps, but Simon, I think it's just because you're so sweet. They just like you.
Oh,
all right.
Gone off, yeah.
So for pineapples, even though again not a stored product pest, one of the things I would recommend is making sure that reefer car or reefer trailer is at the right temperature, because if it's cool enough, they should not be flying. So I double check your temperatures and make sure that those are controlled well. Okay. All right, Michelle, Northern California. Ooh, interesting. Okay.
Christopher, anything you can buy over the counter for ants?
Yeah, believe it or not, a lot of the products that we use as professionals can be bought in the stores. The thing is it may be the same product, but it may not be the same experience and knowledge behind that product. So I think there are some very good baits that are out there that you can buy, depending on if you're going to use it inside versus outside. If you're going to use it outside, I'd go with a granular bait. If you're going to use something inside, they have like a gel bait that usually comes in like syringes. So those would be the suggestions for that.
Okay, Anna, which fumigant could effectively attack beetles in the egg stage?
Yeah, so technically all of them. In the US, we are restricted to phosphine and sulfurofluoride. Those are the only two fumigants we have. There are some countries which are still using methyl bromide. As long as the concentration is accurate and the amount of time that you're holding it for is accurate, it will kill all stages of all stored product species.
Okay, question from Sumit. We had experience with pyrimythos ethyl 2% dust in stored grains. Any new recommendation for said pest situation?
It would depend on which pest you're trying to control. If you're doing stored grain, I'm assuming it's probably one of the weevils, but could be flower beetles or Indian meal moth as well. We've had some very good luck with some insect growth regulators, and there are one or two products, mostly, again, insect growth regulators that can be applied to the grain. Otherwise, you're looking at fumigation or, treating the empty bins before the grain goes in.
Okay, Dean, is it common to see fruit flies in a meat plant? We have a juice plant in close proximity.
Anytime you have any type of wet processing, those small flies, fruit flies, forward flies, whatever they're going to be, yes, I would check your drains, because of course we wash a lot of stuff down the drains, so it kind of gets that buildup, and that's where all the larvae are living. So if you can get rid of that buildup, it flushes all the larvae down. They have nothing to eat, and those fruit fly populations will go down. So absolutely, meat plants, juice plants, bakeries are another big one I see a lot of small flies in. Absolutely.
Right. Tabor, for example, if larvae of insects are stored in beverage container, then what do we have to do to control further contamination?
Oh, I'd be interested to know why they are inside the beverage container. I'm assuming that the beverage containers are coming empty and you're filling them. In which case, that to me is a supplier issue. You should be going to your supplier and having them do something different. But if that doesn't answer the question, feel free to email me and I'll try and dig into that more for you.
Thank you. And Cheryl, is there a recommended chemical to use to treat organic product for IMM?
Yes, so that sidetrack, that mating disruption, is actually certified as organic, so you can use that. You can also use diatomaceous earth, though I'm not a huge fan of that. It takes a while. And there are some organic products that are based on oils like orange oil or peppermint oil and stuff like that. But we can't use that on the food, and it does smell. So sometimes we don't even want to use it around the food, but definitely check into that sidetrack.
Okay, thanks. I think we've got through them all. Hopefully we answered your question if you posted it. Brilliant. So we've got better and better as we've gone along. It's, we could carry on forever now, and it'd be amazing. So thanks very much, Shell. We'll follow up, like telling everybody, with the webinar recording and also the link to the presentation that was going to be, and we'll include your contact details in there. And we're going to have Shell back soon, because we're going to put some training on, shorter training courses, quick blasts of training. Hopefully some of you will attend those, so watch out for them in the near future. But thanks a lot, Shell. Enjoy your wine tasting meal dinner this weekend.
I'll go search for some fruit flies in those wines.
Oh yeah, you can have mine. Enjoy anyway. Thanks a lot, Shell.
All right, thank you, folks. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, everybody, we'll follow up with an email in a couple of hours, but for now you can download your certificate in the sidebar. Thanks for attending today, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.